We're excited to have everyone here for our webinar for May, and we're very excited about having Mark Diamond here with us from Contoural. So to start, for those who are maybe not quite as familiar with AIIM Florida chapter, and of course we're part of AIIM International. And so what our mission and vision is, and how we are serving both our member prospects as well as our AIIM professional members, and those who always wish to receive information via our educational series in the form of the webinars such as that you've joined for today. So what we try to do is make sure that we cover all things regarding hot topics of research, compliance, resources, and really apply this in a consultative manner. We are not consultants. Some of us do that for a living, but AIIM Florida chapter, as the Association for Intelligent Information Management, is really all about making sure that you are informed on the topics of digital transformation and related. So we try to provide you with documentation around innovations, around the collaboration, sharing, and certified education courses that AIIM provides. And we try to cover topics of automation, security protection, privacy, insight, RPA, information governance, and the list goes on. So we always want to keep you updated with focus on digital transformation news, and keep best practices in front of you. We will be renewing our newsletter shortly, so feel free to reach out to us via our email info@aiimfl.org. That's info@aiimfl.org. I'd also like to, as you know, we are reaching what I like to call, you know, the potential pandexit. Hopefully we're getting past all things pandemic, and things are opening up. There are actual live events being scheduled. I've seen July through October, and that's quite exciting. So we do want,
you know, that's the part where you want to understand when those pieces of information are available and when those connections can occur, so that you can have that.
Can you mute, please? Can you mute, please?
The considerations, I think, that we haven't covered yet, right? As you go through that, you want to kind of, you know, as a group, think about, you know, what else needs to be in here? What else can we include in this, so that we have all the information that we need to describe the information that we have.
I don't know which one it is, but they will be muted.
And piece to this is.
Okay, I think I found the person. Okay, so just to finish out where I was going with that, was that the virtual, you know, we've all been on a lot of virtual meetings over the last 15, 16 months, right? So we want to know, as in service to you as a chapter, what is going to work for you going forward. So if you would, during the presentation by Mark Diamond, if you would chat to us using the chat box, message us, and let us know with a simple yes, maybe, or no as to your interest in continuing to join on to our virtual series. Why am I asking that? Because we are also trying to plan around Q4 of this year with the hopes of going back to having a few of our live events that we have had traditionally as the AIIM Florida chapter. So I greatly appreciate that. And again, I thank you very much for joining and being part of our presentation here today. It is now my pleasure to introduce Melissa Dederer. And Melissa is our advisor on information governance on the board of directors for AIIM Florida. And she is a former expert on information governance records and very active traditionally with both AIIM as well as ARMA. So Melissa, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, Mark Diamond. He is the president and founder of Contoural, and he is recognized as an industry thought leader in proactive records and information management, litigation readiness, and risk and compliance strategies. Under his leadership, Contoural has grown to be the largest independent provider of legal and regulatory, litigation readiness, and risk and compliance consulting services. As trusted advisors, he and his company help bridge legal, compliance, security, and business needs and policies with effective processes, technology, and change management. And now I will turn it over to Mark so he can present us with launching an information governance program, making your moonshot. Mark?
Thank you very much, Melissa. Good, I guess I can say good morning there. I talk all over the place, as many of you do talk all over the place, and I have to look at what time it is for everybody to make sure I don't inadvertently wish good afternoon or good morning. So today we're going to talk a little bit about launching an information governance program. And it's interesting. A lot of organizations are really looking at either starting or launching an information governance program or furthering the execution, but it's turning out to be a little bit more tricky than many organizations have realized. And want to know the question why. Next slide, please, Carlos. I think that's me. And next one after
Sorry,
that.
I think you're presenting the slides, Mark.
Oh, am I? Okay. Oh, I am. There we go.
We don't
I
see
need you to
anything
share
yet.
though.
Oh, okay. I saw that
No
come up.
slides yet.
I got it. I understand, guys. I have done this before. For some reason, my thing. Let me share. I thought I'd quickly switch to my view. There we go. I need to host this disabled participant sharing. So if I can share. Nope, I still can't quite share.
Craig, is there something you need to do so Mark can share his screen?
So let me check here. I'm sorry, Mark. And there you are.
We have access controls.
You should be good to go now, Mark. Sorry for that oversight.
Yeah, that's fine. Here we go. All right, I'm sharing.
Oh, good. Now we can see. Thank you.
So what am I talking about? You know, a few years ago, I was talking to general counsel for a very large corporation, and we were going through his entire information governance strategy. And he stopped in the middle of the conversation. He said, you know what, this is hard. And I'm like, what do you mean? He says, you know, this feels like a moonshot. We do this all the time. And I guess I didn't have that reaction. But then I began to think about it saying, this is tricky. I mean, there are a lot of different parts to be able to do this. And it's interesting that exact evening I was sitting in my hotel room, reading email, the TV was on HBO, and they were, you know, showing the movie Apollo 13. And this was the scene in Apollo 13 where they're trying to figure out how to actually get oxygen back into the cabin. If you've seen the movie, that they had a lot of failures, and they're very creative in terms of doing it. And then it struck me, to some extent, an information governance program for many organizations, a real information governance program, does feel like a moonshot. And to be able to make your moonshot, you need the type of creativity, the type of approach, and being smart about it, similar to what the Apollo missions are. So today I want to talk about how many organizations are looking at the information governance program, and not only what are the approaches you can do, but what lessons can we learn from a very old program, the Apollo program, and how can we apply that to the world of information governance? And I'm going to believe that this is a big part of it. Now, the first thing is, it's interesting. When President Kennedy talked about going to the moon, he didn't say, we need to advance technology, we need a framework for building out the moon. He didn't say, we need a combination of technology, processes, and implementation. Actually, he said, the exact words is, I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving this goal before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. In that one sentence, what are we going to do? When are we going to do it? How do we know if we're successful? I mean, he basically encapsulated the entire complex, decades-long effort into a single sentence. And actually did that quite eloquently. And people got it. People understood it. When we talk about information governance, how do you define information governance? Hey, we could have a whole webinar where we talk about, let's compare your definition of information governance with my definition of information governance. The specification of decision rights and accountability framework to assure appropriate behavior. That's Gartner. All right. So this is, in our view, one of the more standard definitions. Or we can look at the ARMA definition, a strategic framework composed of standards, processes, roles, and metrics. Or if you don't like that one, you can always go with the SEDONA's, organization's coordinated interdisciplinary approach. And by the way, if you read these definitions, somehow you're supposed to be inspired or getting what information governance is. You can look at CGOC, or you can look at, there's a number of definitions out there. By the way, there's somebody, I'm sure AIM has a definition. Some group out there I am dissing because we are not providing their official definition of what information governance is. I'm sorry, if you went to your CEO and said, we need to do the specification of decision rights and an accountability framework to ensure appropriate behavior in the value creation, storage, use, and archiving, deletion of information, he or she would look at you kind of strange. And somehow we're not getting very good at messaging what is the program and what do we need to do. I was just on the call. Matter of fact, I was just on a call a few minutes ago with the senior executive team. And one of the first things we want to talk about is, what is information governance and why should we care, and what does it mean for the organization? I'm going to make the argument today that these types of descriptions don't help your cause. Had President Kennedy used a description like this to describe the Apollo launch, we would still be in the ground. Where I find information governance becomes more useful in describing it is to be more plain spoken. Here's some actual comments from different employees who talked about the pain of their current processes and how it is impacting their productivity and what they were doing. Version control drives me crazy. We have 3 copies of everything. I hit my email limit on a daily basis. We don't know much more about keeping electronic records. These are real pains. And why not translate, when you're talking about information governance, instead of using the jargon, some of the real pains that employees have? Because quite frankly, you're going to be a lot more effective. Somehow we think we have the mistaken idea that if we're going to be fancy, or if we're going to use these sophisticated definitions, that somehow that's going to endow more respect, or we're going to have more veracity in our description. And no, I'm going to make the argument you actually need to be simple. When we talk about information governance, we often talk about it, hey, you got a whole bunch of documents and data out there. Some of them are records that you need to be saved for a particular period of time. You have legal and regulatory requirements. You got to keep this stuff. Some of the stuff you want to get rid of. Some of this you want to be able to find if you either have regulatory inquiry or review discovery, and we've been through this. Some of your big pile we need to apply privacy and data security classification to. And quite frankly, some of this is very useful information. We need to separate the useful information from the clutter. And so we can better share and collaborate this useful information. And as a matter of fact, all these 5 things are related. If you do one well, you're going to do another one well, or quite frankly, you can't do one without doing all 5 of these at the same time. This is information governance. And so again, I'm a big believer when you're launching an information governance program is to keep it clear and to keep it plain, because at AIIM conferences or other conferences, we can sit and debate these things, but in the real world of explaining to senior management what we're trying to do or why we need to do more of it, plain spoken is better. By the way, we're going to make the argument today that information governance versus data governance is, a lot of confusion over this. We believe, again, I go to information governance conferences and they swear that data governance is a subset of information governance. And so, in their view, it's clear. You go to the data governance conferences, they go, no, information governance is a subset of data governance. It's the other way around. And they believe that. We believe that information governance is separate than data governance. We believe that information governance tends to complement data governance. Generally, in our view, information governance mainly focuses on paper, semi-structured, unstructured, and some structured, and data governance focuses much more on structured data out there. Also, sometimes touches on the semi-structured, unstructured. We also believe that information governance is about making individual employees productive, compliant, useful, whereas data governance is much more about answering big questions about to whom should we sell or how should we price or other things like that. The point is that they're different. And so we get these questions all the time about how is this, and we like to be, again, clear and plain spoken on what the differences between those are. By the way, I'm going to pull up here to make sure that I can see if we have any questions. Or Carlos, can you alert me if there's questions? I don't have the chat box in front of me, but feel free to interrupt me, please. How about messaging? What can we learn about messaging? And how do you message? I mean, if you're sitting in your organization saying, we really need to do a lot more around this, how can I explain to my senior management that it's a good idea to do more? Some of this comes down to messaging. What can we learn about the Apollo mission? Well, the Apollo mission, it's interesting. They did not have a single message. The Apollo mission, when they looked at this, had different messages at different phases. During the initial part of the program, it was from 1957 and 1961, Sputnik. It was, the Russians are beating us to space. They have beaten us to space. We have to catch up. And, if you look at the history of that time, there was huge concern. I mean, talk about a nation that was motivated, not just in the space program, but, science education and math education and preparing ourselves. And if you look at the spending on this, huge increase in spending right away to be able to do this. But then it's interesting, they didn't stay with the Sputnik, hey, the Russians are beating, we got to worry from a national security defense point of view. It was about 1961, we saw the message that President Kennedy said, we're going to land on the moon. We're going to set the goal and we're going to be the first to land on the moon, and we're going to do it within this decade. And it's funny, not everybody understood the technical details and how we're going to do it or what the issues were. But it was everybody, hey, we know we got it. And it's funny, even after we landed on the moon, the message shift again towards detente and what can we do? And if you look at the funding, they were pretty good about keeping the funding going for a large number of years using different messages. What is the right message for your organization? If you're going to launch your information governance program, if you're going to do your Moonshot, what are the messages that you're going to use? Now, I'm not a big fan of trying to show fancy information governance yeah, I've got this 8-point maturity model that, different levels that, by the way, I'm going to correlate this with the definition of information governance. Yeah, some organizations, but most of this just doesn't quite stick. I mean, why do we need to do this? What's the messaging we want to use? Who's going to be engaged? Just because what I'm showing here is the ARMA model, just because the ARMA model may be standard within ARMA, it's not necessarily standard within other organizations, or the AIM, talking among the same group, may be standard messaging. And so the attempts to justify, and by the way, the other thing is, we better do an information governance program, or otherwise we're going to be in big trouble. Yeah, that may well be true, and companies do get in big trouble for not doing things, especially around the world of privacy or e-discovery. But senior management sitting back saying, well, hold it, we've gone many, many years without getting in big trouble. What's changed now? I mean, how is it different? And so again, we have to do this because this is what the model says or what the scale says. Yeah, that's not very. One of the most successful things that I found is, we're behind. Here's an actual benchmark we did for a company. And they said, how is our maturity versus our peers? And it's funny, when we presented this to senior management, to be honest, they didn't really, we tried to be simple. I'm not sure they all really quite understood what this information governance thing was. But when they saw that they were behind their peers, that their peers were investing a lot more into this and they weren't, that really got their attention. And this is oftentimes one of the most powerful ones. And again, we didn't care about the space race until our peer, the Russians and Sputnik, basically came up and said, we need to do something because we're being beaten. What's this thing we need to do? I don't know, but we better do it because the Russians are beating us. This tends to be a much more powerful way of doing this. All right. What type of messaging does tend to work? What have we found out there? It varies. We do, where's your company trying to go? Where's your organization trying to go? What are you trying to do? Some organizations, employee innovation is very big. I had one assistant general counsel we worked with that she didn't call it the information governance or the records program. She called it the employee innovation program, because that was one of the top things management drives for that year. And she endeavored to show how what we're doing around records management actually was a big driver for employee innovation, made the connection. By the way, some of you may say, well, hold it. I shouldn't have to explain. I shouldn't have to justify. We have to follow the laws out there. No, I'm sorry. You may think that. We're talking about messages that work. This is not just a justification. Another one may be faster M&A, merchant acquisition integration. Another one may be reducing the impact of employee turnover. We did some research. We found out that 35% of the employees are going to retire in the next 6 years. And when they retire, all of their information basically gets orphaned out there. And so what we're trying to do is figure out what is it that we are doing now that will help drive this type of program and make the employees more productive. Sometimes you can do it with e-discovery risk. Sometimes you have a really bad e-discovery and it costs you millions of dollars and they're like, we don't want to go through that again. Well, we've got a plan for you. We can talk about that. One of the things I don't find, so here's an actual example of a company that this was for a state agency where they went out and they basically said, hey, we're looking to do cost savings here. And what we want to do is we think that if you do this 5-year program, you'll save $16,540,476. They thought the ROI would be the winner argument. What's the problem with this? Well, the problem is if you present a number like 16,540,476, why 476? Why not 477 or 475? You just look at the number, it begins to lack credibility. And matter of fact, as you dig down, this agency had received a lot of fines for public records requests, a huge amount of fines, and this model assumed that those fines would continue every year unless they did this entire recommendation. And so again, it just sort of lost credibility associated with that. I think you need to be smart about it. We find that one of the best arguments around ROI is breaking your ROI into 4 different categories. Hard ROI, dependent ROI. If how can we avoid bad, expensive things happen to us, or if bad things happen to us, like we have a major e-discovery, how can we reduce the cost? Legal and privacy risk, clearly a big issue. You could actually put information security risk in there this week. Or one of the best ROI tends to be a very soft ROI, but real ROI, which is employee productivity. What can we do to make our employees more productive? And so many organizations out there are really at the point where their employees are spending a huge amount of time. It's not 6 hours per week straight, but it's 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. You could argue that's a little squishy, and I argue, some employees it's going to be less than 6 hours, some it's going to be more, but in the aggregate, it's true. And it's also true that if we put together this smart strategy, that we can cut that time in half. Again, these are the type of arguments that resonate with senior management, how you message and what you're looking to do. Or here's an example of a 5-year model, ROI model, based on a variety of them. And by the way, you can say, okay, I don't like the soft ROI is too squishy for me. Okay, fine. Even without the soft ROI, we think there's a very good return multiple here on what we're doing and a better way for us to be able to do this. And so this is a big driver for us. How do we do this, and how do we do this in steps? Too often we want to go with the big bang, especially if we're looking to adopt new technology. We're going to do all in one big bang. How did Apollo do it? It's interesting. Apollo created a number of different missions. They started out as Mercury missions, but they quickly realized, hey, let's map this out. Let's first we're going to leave the Earth, then we're going to go around the Earth, and then we're going to go around the Earth a couple times, and then we're going to have a manned mission, and then we're going to have a manned mission where we go to the moon, but we actually don't stay at the moon. We're just going to go fly around it. Then we're going to go around the Earth some more, and then we're going to go to the moon, around the moon again to test it, and then we're going to finally go to the moon, land on the moon, and come back. And as early as 1968, people knew that it was probably going to be Apollo 11 in 1969. We broke this out into pieces. We knew what we were going to do. And nobody said, hey, it's 1967 or 1968 right now. When are we going to go into the moon? And people know, no, it's Apollo 11. We all know that. It's going to be out there. So they broke it into pieces and they were able to communicate it. And they likewise got experience. I mean, they had a tragedy with, a rocket exploded, but they learned from that and they were able to apply those lessons onto future missions. And so they broke this off, and it worked not only from a communications perspective, but it worked from a technology perspective, and it worked from while one group was working on the lunar module, another group was working on something else. It's interesting when organizations today approach information governance, they often say, we need an electronic document disposition project. Okay. Oh, by the way, but we can't delete stuff until we have legal hold. So we need an electronic document disposition and legal hold update. Oh, but we need let me correct it. We need a electronic document disposition, legal hold, see, even I can't say it, legal hold project, and data classification project. We need a electronic document disposition, legal hold, data classification, technology evaluation. Somehow these simple projects turn into these monolithic projects that are just huge out there. And these big monolithic projects get stuck. The number one problem with information governance projects is they get stuck. Why? Because they make them too big, too complicated, they don't break them into pieces, and they end up being too monolithic. We can learn lessons from this. We can learn lessons from the Apollo program and being smart about it. Break your projects. Just a few minutes ago, got off the phone explaining to a president and a CFO and a CIO and a general counsel what their strategy was, how we broke this up into different pieces, what you want to do at what piece along the way. What's the right, the Apollo didn't say, hey, Apollo didn't say, hey, it's 1961, let's send somebody to the moon in 1962. They said, no, this is probably going to take us 10 years. Let's space this out into pieces. Why not do the same thing with information governance efforts? Why not break it into pieces? Why not do an enterprise rollout? Why not think about what you're trying to do in what order? And matter of fact, when we're successful with the initial pieces, it will get people excited about the next piece, and we'll establish a track record of success. And by the way, this is going to vary from company to company, what you do in what order and how much you do it and when you do it, and what's a high priority and what's not. Tremendous variation. This is not a sort of out of the box, we're just going to do this. But we need to be smart in terms of breaking this into roadmaps and the total amount of pieces that are out there. It's important in our view to have metrics to measure the success of your program. We're increasingly seeing organizations applying this to information governance, which means, how do we know if we're successful? It's, people are afraid about applying metrics to this. We always like to talk about how many of your records are managed versus unmanaged, how much of your sensitive information is controlled or managed, and how much is not managed. How much rot have you deleted? Let's keep track of that. I mean, we talk about rot all the time. How much rot have we created? And by the way, how much new rot has come and gone? How much do we spend on e-discovery with a prototypical case for an initial and a target? And how many hours per employee is spent searching per week? And so it really varies out there. And again, if they can track what you're doing, and more important, if you as an information governance professional are willing to stand up and saying, not only do I believe in this, measure me, keep me honest. I'll keep myself honest, as a matter of fact. Measure me, we'll go through and we'll see how we're doing. It's funny, we want the big budgets, we want the ability to do this, we want the freedom to do this, but what's the responsibility we're willing to take, and how much are we willing to measure ourselves with that responsibility? Okay, how do we do this? And I alluded to this a little bit earlier. When the Apollo program got put together among the engineering community, at one point they wanted to create one big rocket ship that would leave the Earth. It would go to the moon. That same rocket ship would land on the moon, and that same rocket ship would then come off the moon and back to Earth. They quickly scrapped that idea. They said, we need different vehicles. We need a launch vehicle. We need a lunar orbiter. We need a lunar lander. As a matter of fact, we can connect these into pieces. They took a divide and conquer approach. And by the way, this not only made it easier and simpler, because it was much easier to land and launch from a lunar lander, much easier to do that from a lunar lander, but you could also develop these things in parallel. It wasn't one, and actually it was. I would make the argument that this one single engineering decision was probably one of the most important and most successful engineering decisions they made in the entire Apollo program. Is they broke it up into pieces. They knew how to do this, and they just had to make sure that the different pieces work together. Unfortunately, one of the things that we see among information governance is we want to create this huge taxonomy, this huge product. We're gonna use SharePoint for everything. Well, maybe SharePoint doesn't work for everything, or we're gonna use OpenText for everything. Becoming a little less true now with technology, but we see sort of this, we want one thing for everything. This is where, again, use Microsoft 365. There's a place for SharePoint. There's a place for OneDrive. There's a place for Teams. We want to apply consistent policies. We want to make sure they work together, but we need to get away from this world of monolithic repositories. And in my view, one of the biggest holdbacks of enterprise content management professionals is that they still have the view that the world should be one single large repository with a very complex taxonomy, which I'll talk about in a second. And that's sort of like, I'm going to have one rocket ship that's going to go land on the moon and come back to Earth. No, what we need to do, in our view, is have an overall governance framework that utilizes different pieces of technology out there that makes it easier for us to be able to do this. Likewise, I'm going to make the argument that too many organizations want to focus on just an official records repository. They don't make room for working documents. They don't make room for, other types of content out there that we need to manage by just having a large official repository. And again, the same idea. We don't think it works. One of the big issues we find out there is that enterprise content management professionals or information governance professionals really want to make these huge, perfect taxonomies. Why do they do that? Well, we have records requirements, we have data security classification requirements, we have privacy requirements, we have collaboration requirements. And so they take all these requirements and they distill this into a massive taxonomy. And they say, see, I have got a perfect taxonomy. And they present it to the user community, and the users go, okay, I went through the training. Where do I put my stuff? Let me see. I got my document here. I don't put it here. I got to move to the right. No, it doesn't go here. It doesn't go here. Oh, hey, they finally find the red box. I realize this is where in the taxonomy, this is where my stuff goes. I got it. And they put it there. And as soon as they put it there, they go, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that again. Why don't I create my own little cache of documents here on the side, and I'll use that. And just because in case I need to find it and I can't remember where I put it. And matter of fact, they start putting more in the cache, and pretty soon they don't put anything in taxonomy. We were engaged by a Fortune 50 consumer packaged goods company that had put together a $5 million implementation. It was open text. It could have been any of the vendors, not beating up on open text. Except they did a survey and they said only 2% of the documents were in the system. Why is that? Why is nobody putting anything in our document management system? We put this huge effort. We looked at it, it became very clear to us very quickly. Too complex, too complicated. What looked like perfection to you as the records manager or the administrator looked complicated and ugly to the users. We've got to keep these things simple. We're a big believer in the 5-second rule. Employees will spend up to 5 seconds manually classifying documents. And that means classification for retention, for data security classification, for privacy, for legal holds and collaborations and access controls. If you want to have drop downs will probably violate the 5-second rule because you're going to have multiple drop downs, or if you have a long list of drop downs, sorry, it just doesn't work. It works with a few people some of the time, but you probably have a failed strategy on that. We really need to be smarter and have everything that they need to do to be done in 5 seconds and hopefully less than that. Now, the good news is technologies, and I'll use Office 365 as a great example, allow us to implement the 5-second rule quite easily through what we call a data placement strategy. The data placement strategy means that any given employee only has a few places that they'll put stuff. Now, one employee may have 4 places, another employee may have 4 different places, another employee may have 4 different places. And again, it's going to vary by role or department or group or type of information. But for any given employee, we want a real simple view. You got to put stuff here. And when you've got something, you put in a working documents folder, you put in a finance records folder, you put in a contracts folder. And when you do, the system does inheritance for the classification and the tagging. So the system says, this landed in finance records. I put this level of retention, this level of data security classification. The system puts this level of who can have access controls on this. We want to put all the rules in the back end for this. And so all the employees need to do is drag and drop to keep it really simple, really intuitive. Because if it's anything more than that, we've seen the road is littered with, complex taxonomies, with drop-down menus, with too many choices or even a few choices. We got to make this easy. Otherwise, employees won't be able to follow that. Which means, by the way, we need to program our systems. By the way, what I just described is complicated. You're saying, oh my gosh, I need to do the configuration for using labels and for using, records or data security classification levels or sensitive information labels. I need to figure out what goes where and who has what folders and we do it. Yeah, you're right. But I'd rather have a few of us get a headache versus everybody getting a headache. And because if a few of us get a headache, that's going to be much easier and much more likely. We want to make it really simple and easy for the end user. Sometimes content management specialists take pride in having these really complex systems. No, they don't work. It's the equivalent is the records manager that creates a 75-page schedule with all these, 400 record types and all these citations, and they say, "Isn't this great? See how complicated it is." I look at those and I go, "No, that's not good. That's all you're doing is making it harder to follow." I mean, the whole idea here is we want to get something that's executed. The same thing applies. We want to have a real drag and drop strategy. Part of the important thing that organizations need to go through is targeting the right maturity. Should you be walking? Should you be driving a bicycle? Should you be having a golf cart? Should you need a Chevy, or do you need a sports car? Companies make two mistakes in our view. Is they either have very limited capability, walking or driving a bicycle, they haven't really implemented, or they do it for one record type, but they completely ignore email, typical example. Or they try and shoot for the Ferrari strategy, this fancy, very overly aggressive level of maturity. And the problem, if you've ever owned, I don't own a Ferrari, but friends that do. If friends who own a Ferrari say their cars tend to spend more time in the garage being repaired than actually driving. We think that organizations need to make a conscious level of maturity. When you look at the Apollo mission, they did that very well. They said, okay, let's break it into pieces. This is what we'll do. There were some missions they decided not to do, in part because they targeted the right maturity and they stretched themselves just enough without overdoing it. And matter of fact, they're able to make their schedule and be able to get to the moon on time. And so that tends to be a big driver for organizations out there. In our view, the best practice is to work with employees, not against them. And so good strategies, if you want to make your moon launch, is well, I'll give you a home analogy. My kids are older now, but when we were young, we had a playroom, and the playroom was full of toys and toy boxes full of toys. And I finally one day said, "Yeah, we got too many toys here. Let's get rid of the wagon." No, I want the wagon. The guys, you haven't used the wagon in months. No, we get in a fight over every single toy and how do we clean it up? And some of you may listening, if you're looking to do, defensible disposition, maybe that sounds familiar with your employees that want to hoard their documents. What works? Well, in our house, not me, my wife, put some clear plastic bins in the garage. They cleared out the toy room. We actually discovered some toys. We had rediscovered some toys we had forgotten about, which were in the bottom of the toy box. But because it was in a clear plastic bin, we could see it all. And then, every 6 months, some of the toys in the clear plastic bin would sort of kind of disappear. But we tried to take the drama out of it. What are the principles that we can apply to information governance? Keep documents accessible. If you move documents to someplace where people won't see it, they're going to freak out and they're going to do underground archiving. Give them an option. Hey, kids, we're going to keep the toy room clean, but see, they're right here. Anytime you want it, it's right here. You can get it. We centralize control of deletion. We did not ask employees to delete, and we drive deletion based on user inactivity. They didn't really have to do anything. All we had to do is, put the toys in the not the bin in the toy box, but the bin in the garage. All we're trying to do, the process took care of itself. All we need you to do is put documents here. I'm not asking you to change your behavior or delay it, tag it, or to look for old stuff and delete it. We wanted to keep it really simple. And if you find yourself fighting against employees, take a step back. You've missed something. You're either missing one of the business drivers, or not communicating effectively, or failing to highlight the productivity gains. But if you find yourself in a big fight with the business units or employees, you've made a mistake. Stop, reverse. You missed a turn back there. We need to take a better look at it. This comes to the point that of equal and opposite reactions. So the very first spacewalk out there, the NASA engineers were pretty smart. And they knew, hey, when we're just tethered, but we're not holding on in our very first spacewalk out there, we need some way, because if we push against this, it's going to, for every equal and opposite reactions, as we all remember from our college physics class, maybe our high school physics class. So they actually gave him a little tiny propulsion system. It was like a little tiny fire extinguisher. And so when he needed to go everywhere, he gave a little squirt on the fire extinguisher. It turns out that he got a little overactive on it and almost ran out of juice in the fire extinguisher. I mean, he was still tethered, so he could still pull his rope in to be able to do that. For every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and the NASA engineers remembered this in space. And so they're able to do that. Too many companies forget this equal and opposite reaction when it comes to information governance. They will often entertain what we call aggressive deletion activities. We're going to delete all email after 30 days. I just 3 days ago, I was talking to a CFO of a up and coming company, and he said, "Are we going to implement the best practice of email and deleting all emails after 30 days?" Well, no, I don't think that's a good practice. Matter of fact, here's the problem. When you start aggressively deleting documents, you're going to create a counter reaction from employees. They're going to go, "Oh my gosh, they're deleting my stuff." And so they're going to start, putting stuff on network file shares or on desktops. And then you're going to go, I'm going to stop that. Or they're going to start putting stuff on USB drives, and they're going to go, "Oh, I'm going to lock down the USB drive." So then they start printing or copying and stuff. This is a behavior that we call underground archiving. I had one guy that came up to me in one of my seminars. He worked for a financial services organization, had a fair amount of fairly sensitive information. He says, "I really like what you said about saving work documents at home." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Every email I get, every file I either create or receive, I send these documents to my home system. And, every quarter I burn a DVD. It happens. It happens a lot. By the way, really bad thing. We don't recommend this. This is a really bad thing for organizations to do. The problem is, in your zeal to delete unneeded rot, and there's a lot of it there. I'm not saying that, there's a huge amount of rot out there to be deleted, but in your zeal to delete it, you've actually made the problem worse because you've driven this other behavior called underground archiving. Success is a behavior change management problem. We need to go from the state of employee behavior of save everything everywhere, and this is my data, and I want to access it, and I can put it on my home system, into a desired state of, how do we save the right stuff in the right place in the right area? To do that, part of it is policy. We know that. Part of it is technology. That's clearly a very big part of it. Part of it is process. Part of this is is employee behavior change management, communication, messaging, training programs. What's in it for me? What's the win? How will this help me? And there's a win for everybody in this, by the way. If you don't see a win for everybody, you're not looking at that. That's out there. And so, how do we get to the desired state? It's working with people to be able to do this. And so it's smart behavior change management. I got a question up here. One of the big problems corresponds to the volumes of documents accumulated over the years. How to integrate this type of problem in the model that you propose here? That's a good question. So the first thing we're going to say is, don't start on your legacy documents. Don't hit the old stuff first, because every time you hit the old documents first and you have a big old document cleanup project, that feels good. The problem is you have not created a go forward document strategy. And then pretty soon the new documents become the old documents. And then we call it trimming the bamboo. You're not being very successful on this. Get a go forward strategy for your semi-structured, your unstructured. Start putting paper reduction processes in place. Then you can go back and start hitting your legacy data. And there's a number of different strategies for doing legacy data disposition. Some of it involves, migrating it. Some of it involves assessing. Some of it, quite frankly, if it's super entwined. If you've got a lot of paper documents, sometimes you do an assessment to say, I've gone through this box. At most everything in here we need to keep 7 years. This box is 5 years old, as opposed to the prudent thing is just keep it for 2 more years and then get rid of it. I mean, there's a whole variety. We have a whole nother webinar going after the legacy content out there. But important thing is get the go forward strategy first, make it usable. Let's stop the hurt, and then we can address the legacy content out there. And by the way, let me know if I addressed your question there. How do we get the business units to care? We did some work for a large oil company, and we're working with the legal team, and the legal team engaged one of the business units, and they didn't want to play along. And they said, Mark, can you talk to this guy? I mean, he's senior operations, he's vice president of this business unit. So I had a little hint what was going on. And, talked to him, and he said, well, our job is to drill holes in the ground. That's what we do. And we've been doing it for a long time. And, you want my folks to do all this fancy record stuff. Quite frankly, we don't have time for it, because that's not our day job. And I said, hey, I appreciate you being honest about this. By the way, do you know your employees today spend 5 to 6 hours per week searching for email files and wasting at least 2 to 3 hours per week? And when they're looking for their files and emails today and wasting 2 to 3 hours per week, that's 2 to 3 hours per week per employee that you're not taking holes in the ground. By the way, remember last year you had that large litigation. And it cost, legal team a lot of resources, but it cost 1,500 of your employees a lot of their times. And by the way, 40% of your workforce is slated to retire in the next 5 years. When they retire, all of their information is effectively siloed and lost. The new people can't have access to old people's information in an efficient way, so they have to redesign it. And you finally said, okay, I get it. The point is, I didn't say you have compliance risk. I didn't say, you needed to do this, which all were true. We tried to put these in words or ways that were relevant to the employees and or the business units in words. That's why I don't like, well, we have to do this, or this is what the GARP model says, or, really bad things are going to happen to us unless we do this tomorrow, which may be true, but again, we need to put it in messages that are real for these organizations. So behavior change management is really about getting buy-in with different stakeholders in senior management and mid-level management, employees, with the right messaging, the right approaches. And by the way, your audiences may differ. There's a lot of sophistication that has to go into this. And likewise, the messages will vary from organization to organization, which works, what is goodness and why this cares for you is important for some organizations, but may work completely differently in other organizations. And so we're really trying to find what are the right messages that will work for different people. All right. Here's a good example of pain where an employee spends 4 to 6 hours per week searching. They're drowning in employees' comments. What we want to do is find that existing pain and play it back to them. Here are actual comments that we had from an assessment, and it's like the messy garage where you can't find anything in the garage, and it's all out there. So it's be mindful of finding the right pain and being able to do that. Here's a good example of some good employee creative engagement where employees are out there, and this was actually something we did for Whirlpool, where they created some icons and they made fun of it. And too often we want to have this dry, boring training. They actually made it light and lively. Are you a giant hoarder? Are you a mind monster? Are you a file fiend? What are you? How do we make this something that's more relevant and in an entertaining way? So, I'm sort of running at the top of the hour here. I want to have a chance to be able to answer some questions. So too often we talk about full information governance programs. People have been talking about this for a year. Is it doable? I mean, companies have tried and they've sometimes failed. No, actually, there are a lot of cases, whether it's a large life sciences company or an insurance carrier, a regional bank or high technology company or a federal agency or consumer packaged goods company, where they have been successful in the world of information governance. They have been successful in doing this, and in part because they adopted the same principles that the Apollo folks did. They defined their mission. They communicated the right way. They broke it into pieces. They were creative, and to some extent, it wasn't one thing they did. It was like the folks in Apollo 13, when all of a sudden they had a failure. They got creative. They figured out, how do we put the right pieces together? What do we do? I mean, this is what makes success. It's the attitude that you bring to it, and if you can do it, it's really a beautiful view, right? We think it's a great way, and we have seen successful. And I'm pushing it back against those companies that say we can only do information governance for files, or we've never been able to do email, or we've never been able to work, or we've never been able to make this work for privacy. I'm going to make the argument today that it's doable. It's just a question of how you need to do this. Real briefly about us, we are the largest independent provider of information governance consulting services. We work with more than 30% of the Fortune 500. We work with many state agencies. We work with a number of federal departments, nonprofits, really across the board. We don't think anybody does more information governance consulting than we do. And we are independent. We don't sell any products. We're cross-functional. We do have some maturity models out here. Here's one that the Association of Corporate Counsel asked us to develop on records management maturity model, and we have this available. We actually like this maturity model a little bit better. And by the way, the astute observer will realize we have a tremendous amount of content out there. I glossed over a lot of stuff, and we have like 145, 150 between recorded webinars, articles, detailed white papers, info packs, you name it. Everything I've talked about today, we have a lot of additional information on. So feel free to reach out to us. Happy to share with us on the stuff that we do, that we've glossed over. Okay, I think I just got a couple minutes. Any questions out there, or follow-up, or did I ask, or did I not answer other questions that people may have asked?
Mark, we'll ask everyone to feel free to unmute yourself. Actually, let's see if we can unmute everybody. All right. Anyway, Mark, we've been looking forward to your presentation, since we first reached out to you in February, and Melissa contacted you, and definitely lived up to everything that we expected. And of course, those of us that have seen you in action at ARMA conferences and related, we know the value of your content and your great presentation. While waiting for others here to ask questions, let me just ask Alvaro, if we fully answered your question, Alvaro, is there anything that you would like to and as things relate to starting an IG program? You're unmuted. All right. Take that as a yes. All right. I have a question for you, Mark. With regards to everything related to records management, nothing stands still anymore. There's obviously, and that's technology at its finest. So now we have a lot of AI in whether it's process automation of some sort, robotic or otherwise, or task automation, machine learning, business optimization, okay? And, some of these, if you're talking unattended bot, putting an IG program around, making sure that, that is being controlled in its orchestration. what are some of the visions that you have around that, or even views of potential pitfalls that might?
Yeah, we did a whole webinar on this for MER. I think we have this as a recorded webinar tour that we talked about the implementation of artificial intelligence. So first off, I unfortunately today don't think that AI is a silver bullet. The whole idea that I'll have a bot that will go find my records and I'll just sit in the background and, practice my putting while my bot finds all my records and I don't have to do anything, I don't think is realistic. I will make the argument that that there is a place for AI. I still think there are significant legal and regulatory hurdles around that. Get your general counsel to sign off on your bot-based program probably won't happen because there's not the regulatory guidance around that. At the same time, what we're going closer to is much better content analytics, much better. And so I think there is a place for there, but we have to do that in phases.
Excellent. Excellent. Great point. Anyone else? Questions before we close out today's great webinar session? If you can't think of a question today, I know Mark has his contact information on screen, or if you want to reach out to info@AIIMFL.org, we'll be more than happy to pass that along to Mark. With that,
thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Mark, thank you for your presentation. This is Alvaro Arias from Colombia. But could you please return to my question that I sent through the chat, because I lost the connection, so I did not hear your answer. So I don't know if it's possible. Thank you.
Yeah. So the quick question is, send an email. I can send you a white paper on this. We have a recorded webinar on this. You got to get your go forward strategy first, and then you can hit your legacy data. There are some challenges to hitting legacy data, but get your go forward. The big answer is get your go forward data first, and then hit your legacy data. And email me, and I can send you a webinar that walks through this in very much detail.
And for the benefit of all, Alvaro directs a very large archival project in Colombia, in Bogota. So definitely he's dealing with many types of documents and not just for archival, for IG related as well. Correct, Alvaro?
Thank you.
Well,
but sorry, but I make the question about the the big problem here in Colombia that correspond to the big volumes about the documents accumulate in over years, So the question is how to integrate this type of problem of in the model that you propose here.
Yeah, I think the model that we propose here is very much to be able to integrate with that. It's a question of getting your go forward strategy, getting your policies in place, then going after migrating stuff to the legacy stuff that should be migrated, and then cleaning up the other one. But there are a whole variety of different techniques out there to be able to do that. Again, it's part of a bigger topic. I don't think and I guess to answer your question, you have to be creative and you have to attack the problem in a number of different ways. I don't think there's a single silver bullet for getting after all of the legacy content. You're going to have to do different approaches for different content and whittle it down. That's sort of my long answer.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll definitely make sure that both of you are in contact.
Yeah, just email us, and I could spend a whole hour talking about this, or 2 hours talking about this one issue. So to some extent I'm glossing over, but that's sort of the high level.
Thank you very much. We'll close with saying thank you to all who joined us here today. And we wish everyone a great afternoon, and stay tuned for our upcoming June webinar. So looking forward to seeing you there. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. We greatly appreciate your time and expertise here today.
Okay.